Hello, everyone. Hi, and welcome to our session today. Before we start the session, and I will hand it over to the speakers, I wanted to go over our code of conduct for events. This includes Microsoft Reactor events where we seek to provide a respectful and friendly professional experience for everyone. We kindly ask you to be aware of others, friendly, patient, welcoming, and respectful. Please mind that during the session. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bethany to kick off the session today. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first official session for the Microsoft Data plus AI Kenya Hack together. In this session, I'll be taking you through a bit of what the hackathon entails, and then I'll pass it over to Dico, who will share more about how you can get started with Microsoft Fabric and anything else that you might need to ensure you're well equipped for the hackathon. As I mentioned, this is the second call we're having for the Microsoft Data and AI Kenya Hack, which started on March 12th and will be ending on April 11th. This is the current roadmap for the hack together, and we are in March 20th. That is the third milestone for our entire hackathon, where we're doing a tidy introduction to Microsoft Fabric. So if you're new to Microsoft Fabric, this is the place to get started with. And then from there, we'll have more sessions deep diving into how to build solutions in Microsoft Fabric, as well as using AI agents in Azure AI Agent Service. Thank you so much for joining us. I will pass it over to Dico, who will share more about an introduction to Microsoft Fabric. Before Dico goes live, this page gives all the details you need on the hackathon. So there's a link that will be shared by the moderator where you can go in there and check out what the hackathon entails, what the prizes are, and what you need to be able to upload your projects. So I'll hand it over to Dico to get started. Over to you, Dico.
Thanks, Bethany. Just waiting for the slides to show up on screen. Right. Okay. So, hi everyone. So if you are seeing this dark background that I have, that's because in South Africa we have something called load shedding. So we have a power cut. So what we're going to focus on today is to actually look at a tidy introduction to what Microsoft Fabric is and just how you can be able to get started, and obviously try to cover something that is around AI within Microsoft Fabric. So we're gonna try and do that Okay, I don't know if you lost me there for a second. So before we get started, I'm just going to try to get introductions out the way. My name is Somala Zadigo, and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft as part of the data advocacy team, where we focus mostly on Microsoft Fabric and Azure databases and so forth. So today, what we're going to look at is what Microsoft Fabric is. We're going to look at an overview of what it is, and then we're going to look at the AI-powered experiences inside of Fabric, and maybe we're going to look at a demo of how you can be able to play around with the different experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric. Now, first things first, we need to get started on what Fabric is. And when I look at Microsoft Fabric, I often like to think of it as a platform that I compare it to Microsoft Office. The reason is because you have Office, which is a suite of productivity tools such as your Word, your PowerPoint, and Excel. each of those applications inside of Office, they're optimized for a particular task, be it writing a document or preparing a PowerPoint deck or even creating a spreadsheet. But the applications inside of Microsoft Office actually share common elements, and whether that is the user experience or how you spell check or even copy your text and even format it, and also how you look at how you can be able to look at the foundational layer of Microsoft Office where you govern the applications in Office, how you store and collaborate on files. So I like to make that comparison with Microsoft Fabric and Office, where I would like to say think of Fabric in a similar way, which is a suite of analytics tools. That's what Microsoft Fabric is, whether that's for integrating your data, building a data warehouse, or analyzing your data in Power BI. Each of the tools inside of Microsoft Fabric share common elements as well. So, for an example, how you connect to your data, to how you manage artifacts inside of workspaces, and then how you move from your dev to your test and to your production environment. But also, even in Microsoft Fabric, they share the foundational layers of Microsoft Fabric, whether that's how you manage the security and compliance centrally, or how you store and collaborate on your data, and last but not least, how you even govern the entire platform. And majority of the time, when you look at Microsoft Fabric, it has different experiences inside of it. So it takes you from data ingestion all the way through to your data insights. So for an example, you could use Data Factory to ingest your data from multiple data sources using 170 plus connectors that are offered inside of Fabric. And you could move all the way through to transforming your data and cleaning it using the data science and data engineering experience inside of Fabric, and then build out visualizations and dashboards with Power BI to gain data insights using that same data. And most of the experiences inside of Fabric are actually AI powered, so you find Copilot experiences as well. And what I want to highlight with Fabric is that all of this is sitting on top of something that we call OneLake. And ideally, in not so many words, OneLake is actually your OneDrive for your data. So it stores all of your data. It acts as a OneDrive for your data inside of Microsoft Fabric. And if you want to look at security and governance inside of Fabric, you can use Microsoft Purview. Now, we actually have Fabric as a unified data platform with a variety of these different experiences inside of Fabric, like I mentioned, which is Data Factory, your data engineering, your data science and data warehousing, and also Power BI. Now, real-time intelligence has actually just a few months ago was announced to be generally available, so you can be able to use it inside of Microsoft Fabric. So I'd like for you to think about how much real-time data we have in the world today. So you have your data from your IoT devices, your application telemetry, your logs, and security events. When you work with real-time data, most of the time it has been notoriously difficult. With real-time intelligence inside of Fabric, we've made it very, very simple to be able to work with real-time data using Fabric. So during this public preview, thousands of customers actually explored those capabilities, and we've been seeing a massive adoption of real-time intelligence inside of Microsoft Fabric. And the other thing that we're doing inside of Fabric is we're simplifying this picture that you're seeing on the screen, where we are combining our data engineering and data science experiences into just analytics. And in this case, the reason why we're doing that is to just make sure that we make space for the next experience inside of Microsoft Fabric with Microsoft Fabric databases, which we are bringing the entire database portfolio inside of Fabric, and starting with your flagship SQL Server product. So for an example, you could be able to spin up a SQL Server database inside of Microsoft Fabric now without having to go into, for an example, SSMS to actually have a SQL Server database. So you could be able to play around with databases inside of Microsoft Fabric as part of the experience of Microsoft Fabric. Another thing with Microsoft Fabric, it's not just only limited to the experiences that you saw on the previous few slides, where you're just looking at Data Factory all the way through to Power BI. There's also industry solutions that have been added to Microsoft Fabric, where we are making Microsoft Fabric extensible as well as having partner workloads. So if you want to add your own workloads or experience inside of Fabric, you could be able to add that through the partner workloads as well. So now let's talk about industry solutions a little bit. We know that some of the experiences in Fabric, like Data Factory, you could use it to ingest your data and you can transform it. And then you could use the data engineering and data science experiences to further clean your data and prepare it for either machine learning model training and all of those things. But what about industry solutions? So what you'll find as generally available today is the range of industry solutions that are available. Everything from sustainability to healthcare and retail, which is actually built into Microsoft Fabric. So if you care about these kinds of solutions, it will dramatically accelerate time to value. Now, let's actually try and focus on what I mentioned earlier on, saying about having these experiences out of Fabric AI powered. And I'd like to think of the AI powered experiences inside of Fabric as three types, where we can be able to go through all of them one by one together. But you're going to look at firstly the Copilot accelerated experiences inside of Fabric. So we start with Copilot, where we all know that working with data is a team sport. So for an example, whether you're doing your data ingestion to transformations, to enrichment, and to insights, Microsoft Fabric actually serves many different roles. And that is the point of Copilot, which is to improve the productivity of every data professional inside of Fabric. You're using Copilot and having the Copilot accelerated experiences for each of the Fabric experiences that we have. So what are the Copilot accelerated experiences in Fabric, and how do they fit in with the experiences that we have with Fabric? So with Copilot inside of Fabric, you could use natural language to get your job done, no matter what your role is. You could be a data engineer, you could be a data analyst, and so forth. But you could be able to use Copilot to actually get your job done. With, for an example, Data Factory Copilot or Copilot for Data Factory, you can describe how you want to ingest and transform the data using your natural language, and Copilot will assist you to do that particular job. So whenever you're using Copilot, this is what I always urge, is you use Copilot as an assistant to actually get you results faster in the job that you're doing, instead of just using it to do your job. It's called Copilot and not autopilot for a reason. Now, once you've ingested your data or you've virtualized your data inside of Fabric, you can also use Copilot to help you write SQL queries or SQL statements for structuring your data into tables, to create views and your stored procedures using the Copilot for data warehouse. And then when you are working in a notebook, if, for an example, you're a data engineer, you're working in a notebook using the data engineering or the data science experience inside of Fabric, you can actually more quickly enrich and model and analyze and even explore the data using Python and Spark by getting your assistance from Copilot as well. And then after that, if you are looking at working with real-time data and you actually want to write for example, KQL queries, you could get assistance from Copilot, which will help you to analyze this data for real-time insights and also help you write those KQL queries that you want. And then last but not least, you also have the Copilot for Power BI, which helps you create a report, write decks, queries, and summarize your insights into narrative summaries in seconds. So the main idea of the Copilot accelerated experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric is that every persona gets a Copilot in Fabric for their jobs to be done. But you may have noticed something in this case. So all of these jobs are about building something. right? You're building something, either you're ingesting your data using Data Factory, or you are actually training a machine learning model using a notebook with the data science and data engineering experience inside of Fabric. But what about data insights, where you have users who are trying to actually be able to gain insights and gain better understanding of the data that you have? And this is where I normally say, most of the time when we work with co-pilot experiences, that we always say we always say we have something for everyone, but what about the business users, like I mentioned earlier on, the consumers of the data? So even during this hackathon, as you're building out your solutions, you would build it out and work with the co-pilot accelerated experiences to get you to a certain stage of your solution. But also you have to keep in mind of the business users, the people who are going to be consuming the data from some of the data solutions that you're building out. So in this case, this is where we are trying to look at a solution where you could be able to provide something for the business users. And this is where you have the AI-driven insights within Microsoft Fabric. And in this case, you could have a co-pilot in Power BI or a co-pilot for Power BI. And this is where we're actually going to try and switch over to my other screen and actually do a quick demo together for co-pilot in Power BI. But before we do that, we're going to look at how you can be able to ingest your data inside of Microsoft Fabric, whether you're using Data Factory and so forth. So I'm going to switch from my slides, and then I'm going to go to my browser. So hopefully everyone can be able to see my browser. So inside of Microsoft Fabric, so if you go to app.fabric.microsoft.com, you'll be able to see this home screen that we have inside of Fabric. And you'll be met with a few resources, for an example, to learn more about data. So what is Microsoft Fabric? You could watch a video. You could ingest data into Fabric, which is something similar as to what we're going to do. You could build a lake house. You could build a warehouse, looking at those resources of how you can be able to achieve such a thing. So now we are working with data. We are working on a solution. How do we then get our data from wherever we have it to Fabric inside of Microsoft Fabric? So what we're going to need is a workspace. So we can select new workspace. We're going to create a new workspace, and we are going to say, we're going to call this workspace Hackathon demo workspace. And in this case, because I'm using a Fabric capacity, so in a case where if I wanted to use those co-pilot accelerated experiences inside of Fabric, I would need to have an F64 capacity for Microsoft Fabric to be able to use such capabilities. And also in some instances, if I want to use stuff like AI skills, which we might cover a bit later on in the session, we would need a Fabric capacity and F64 capacity to be able to do that. So I have a Fabric capacity, and I'm just going to switch. I just need to switch my F64 capacity, but in this case, let me just quickly double check there. Say Hackathon. Say Hackathon demo for the workspace name. And then Fabric capacity, it seems like my capacity was switched off. So I'm just going to apply this one and just show you how you can ingest data inside of Microsoft Fabric using a Dataflow Gen 2 or using the Data Factory experience inside of Microsoft Fabric. So I'm going to select apply. And then this will create a workspace where we can be able to do our data ingestion. So for demo purposes, I'm just going to be using just one file that has all of this data. So now, a workspace, for those who don't know, a workspace is like, sometimes I like to think of it as an environment where I have everything that I need to build out my data solution. So for an example, I could have 3 different workspaces, where the first workspace, I either call it a dev environment, for an example, or I call it a bronze layer workspace, because obviously I might be following the medallion architecture and all of those things, but it acts as a container for all of the resources that you're going to be using for your data solution. Right, so now, what's the next thing? The next thing is we're getting our data. My data is in a CSV file. So we're getting the data from a CSV file, we're trying to get it into Fabric, but we want to do something with it. How can we be able to do that? And as we are ingesting that data, we also want to store it inside of Fabric. So what we're going to need in this case, we're going to need a lakehouse so that we can be able to store that data in a table inside of that lakehouse. So we're going to select new item, and you'll see the different options for you to be able to use or to create inside of your workspace. It could be a data flow gen tool, it could be an event stream if you're working with real-time data, or if you want to mirror an Azure SQL database and so forth. There's a lot of artifacts that you can be able to create inside of your workspace. But in our case, we want to create a lakehouse. So I'm going to create a new lakehouse, and I'm going to say demo underscore LH, so LH being for my lakehouse, and I'm going to select create because I want to send data into that lakehouse, the data that I'm ingesting from my CSV file, so that I can further either clean it, transform it, or at a later stage, if I wanted to train a machine learning model on it, then I can be able to do that, right? So I have my lakehouse, and inside of this lakehouse, it's empty. There are no tables, there are no files inside of it. So in this case, I have two options to ingest the data. Either I could just upload the CSV file inside of the lakehouse directly, and then I'll have my data being existing inside of my workspace and my lakehouse as a CSV file. But I also have another option where I can ingest that data and then transform it if I wanted to, which that is the option that we're going to go with here in this case. So we want to transform it and then send it into a table. So we're not going to be using a notebook or a Python or Spark to actually create that table, but instead we're going to just ingest the data and then send it into a new table in which we'll see together. So for us to do that, we would have to create a new data flow gen tool because we want to ingest that data. And then once I select that, it's going to create the data flow gen tool for us. And then inside of that data gen tool, the data flow gen tool, I will then need to upload my CSV file, and then we'll see a preview of how the data looks like, right? So it seems like it's created our data flow Gen 2, so it's named it data flow 1. And you'll see a list of different options that you can be able to use where you are ingesting your data. You could ingest your data from an Excel spreadsheet. You can ingest your data from a SQL server, a local SQL server, or a CSV file, which is the one we're going to be using now. There are more options. So if I select here, get data from another source, for an example, and I'll be able to see a list of sources that I can be able to use. So if I click on view more, you see that there's Excel, CSV, XML, JSON, Access, and there's a lot of them. Even a lakehouse, you could use a lakehouse as a data source where you're ingesting your data, your Azure tables, SharePoint online list. There's a lot of options or variety of options that you can be able to use to ingest your data wherever your data is sitting, as I mentioned earlier on. So for our demo, we're going to select text or CSV, and then you can link to the file. So if your file is sitting on a OneDrive folder, you can link to it, or you could upload the file as it is. So we're going to click on browse, and we're going to upload our file. So I'm going to go to Fabric Learning Hub. Then I'm going to choose sales, which is a file. And then I'm going to select open. And then once I've selected open, it will try to load or upload the data with the file inside of Fabric. And then we can be able to start seeing a preview of the data so that we can be able to see which transformations do we want to do with our data. It could give you an idea whether, for an example, since we're working with sales in this case, we could look at if there's no net revenue column, we could look at it. Okay, we can transform the data to have a column which is net revenue. We can transform the data to have a column which is gross revenue. and so forth, to add new columns, to remove rows, or remove remove empty rows, and so forth. We can be able to do that. Right, so I'm going to select next once it's done uploading. Then it's going to try to connect to the data source, because what it also did is, as I uploaded the CSV file, it uploaded it to a OneDrive folder that is associated with my account, with my M365 account. So in this case, we can see the schema of the table of the CSV file. We have person ID, employee key, store key, order date, and all the way through to unit price discount, since this is a sales table. And again, like I said, the first thing that's coming to mind is, okay, I want to be able to have a gross revenue column. I want to be able to have a net revenue column, or I want to be able to have a discount value column, for an example, because I want to see how much are we spending on giving out people discount for our company, for an example. So once I've seen that, I can select create, and then once I've selected create, it'll create a new query inside of my Dataflow Gen 2. And this new query inside of my Dataflow Gen 2, obviously, again, it gives me the preview of the data, and I can then be able to start doing. So it seems like the camera is eating up my internet connectivity, since I do not have power. So I'm going to switch that off for now. So right now, what we have currently is the query. So in a case where we wanted to do those transformations using the Dataflow Gen 2, we could go to add a column, and we could say add a custom column. So I'm going to add this manually, because currently my biggest friend and intern Copilot is not available here, in which I need an F64 capacity to actually do that. Right, so like, for example, let's see if we can be able to try and add one of those columns. We're doing just the transformation, just this transformation, so that you can be able to see how you're ingesting this data, and then you're sending it into a lakehouse to do something with it at a later stage. Right, so I can click on add column, choose custom column, and then I'll have this pop up. So we're going to name this as gross revenue. It's going to be our gross revenue column. And then I'll select the data type for this, which would be a decimal. So my gross revenue column is going to be the product of order quantity, and say insert column. And then I'm going to put an asterisk to notify that I'm doing a multiplication. And then I'm going to select unit price, and then I'm going to insert column, and then I'm going to select OK. And then hopefully that will give us results as we added our custom column. And you can see, obviously now we have like a custom column, which is gross revenue, which is the product between the unit price and the order quantity. So you could do it this way because you are more hands-on and you already know what kind of insights that you're trying to get out of your data. For an example, with the sales one, we want to look at the gross revenue. We might want to look at the net revenue at a later on stage. We also might want to look at the discount value as well. So, but I'm not going to quickly cover that here, but instead I just want to show you how you ingest your data. What we're doing here is something that you could ask Copilot to assist you with. So in this case, you could ask Copilot using a simple prompt by saying add a column called gross revenue, and you send that prompt, and then Copilot could generate a column for you, which will then do the calculation. As it creates the column for you on your data sets, it will then do the calculation and populate each of the rows here inside of your data set with the values that are obviously the product of the order quantity and the unit price. Okay, now, since we've done this little transformation that we've done here for our data, the next thing that we will need to do is to actually send this data into a lakehouse. The reason why we're sending it to a lakehouse, it could be that we want to train maybe a machine learning model based off of this data to make a predictive analysis on the customer behavior and the revenue that's going to be generated in the near future. So to do that, in my case, because when I created my lakehouse, which is one of the few things that you may notice when you're playing around with Microsoft Fabric, is if you create a data flow Gen 2 inside of the lakehouse, so as the steps that we're following here, we created a lakehouse. Inside of the lakehouse, we selected the option New Data Flow Gen 2. When you create it that way, the query, once you ingest your data from either a CSV file or Azure SQL database, the query that's going to be generated inside of your data flow Gen 2 will come like this with all of your data inside of it, and then have a data destination. So it'll put in the have that option there, you would see, like for example, if I click on delete here and we try to connect it ourselves, you see this cylinder, which is add data destination, where you could select that cylinder, and then obviously you will then choose your lakehouse. You will choose lakehouse, and then when you choose lakehouse, it will try to do the connection to your lakehouse. You select next, and then you'll be able to choose from the different, if you have multiple workspaces, you would choose the workspace that you're working on. So in this case, it's my hackathon demo. And then to your lakehouse with the data that you've transformed using the data flow Gen 2, you will give it a name or a meaningful name that you want to use. So in this case, I'm going to remove the 3 and I'm just going to say sales. And then I'm going to select next. And then it'll try to do a validation against the data destination target. And once that's done, it'll show me the column mapping for the columns from my source and the columns that are going to be created for the destination. So for an example, if I had person ID and it was a whole number, it'll showcase that the destination type as well will be a whole number. So in some instances where you've seen some other data types here, for an example, let's say a date time that is not going to match the format that a lakehouse is looking for in its tables, then you will find that that column is going to be not selected, and you would need to have, or you would need to be able to select the right data type for that. But in my case, everything looks good. So I'm just going to select save settings. And then once I've saved the settings, the only thing now that I would do if I'm not doing any further transformations with this data. So there's a lot of things that I could do with this data, but just for demo purposes, I just want to show you how you can just it'll publish the data flow Gen 2, and then you could see here. You can see here that it's showing a loading or a spinner. It shows that it's trying to publish this data flow Gen 2, and it's trying to also send the data into the lakehouse as well. So once that's done, we can be able to go into the lakehouse, and then we can be able to see the table inside of the lakehouse, and then we can be able to either create a notebook that will then allow us to do further cleaning for our data, and so forth. So that's been successfully published. So let's see if we can be able to see inside of our lakehouse and see if we can see that data. This is in its simplest form how you could ingest your data from a from a CSV file into a table that is inside of a lakehouse. But you could do this for other stuff. So I'm just going to select refresh here and see if it's done this. Or I may have jumped the gun because it also still needs to finish refreshing as well. And once that's done, can we then be able to see the table that's being sent into that? While that is doing that, there's another thing that I actually just want to quickly cover in my slides. So I'm just gonna go back to the slides here. And in my slides is that I wanted to show you a Copilot for Power BI, but in my F64 is disabled in the meantime, and we're not going to debug that together. But if you're using Copilot in Power BI, you could ask Copilot to generate a report for you, in which I'll provide some links on how you can be able to see some of the tutorials on that. It would generate a report for you based off of your data, so based off of your semantic model that you have in your lakehouse and so forth, based off of the tables that you have in that semantic model or in your lakehouse. The semantic model technically is similar to your lakehouse, and then it will be able to create the report for you. What I've also found with working with Copilot for Power BI is that you have to make sure that the relationships between your tables are properly set so that it can be able to provide a report that actually makes sense and reflects your data. Okay, so one key things that we are actually focused on and we've seen is how do we then find the need to streamline access to Copilot, and how do you understand all of those things? So there are Fabric AI capacities, which are a solution designed to address certain challenges. With Fabric AI capacity, you can be able to designate a capacity in your tenant to cover all the reports in your organization, and this applies whether the reports originate from workspaces with assigned capacity or from those without them. So essentially, this ensures that all of your reports can be powered by Copilot, leveraging that designated capacity as well. Now, one thing that I want to cover in the slides, and I'm not really going to do a demo on, is the custom generative AI capabilities for your data inside of Fabric. And those custom generative AI capabilities come in the form of, for an example, in the form of AI skills, in the form of AI functions inside of Fabric. With AI skills, you can be able to have a conversation, or you could be able to have a chat with your data. And when you do that, when you have the chat with your data, you can then be able to have an understanding of what's going on. So I'm just gonna go back to the data flow Gen 2 and see if it's working, and then we'll see if we can be able to get Copilot up and running, or the F64 capacity, so that we can be able to use Copilot to do some of the data transformations and so forth. But one key things with AI skills is that you can then be able to query your data by having a chat conversation, more like, in a way, an agent for your data is how I normally take AI skills as. So you could use AI skills as an agent for your data, where you then be able to have a chat with your data. And then the other thing is the AI functions, which were recently announced. Those AI functions, they actually enable you or help you to actually have, like, for an example, if you wanted to summarize your data, in your data frame that you have in a notebook. So you want to summarize some of the data inside of a column in a notebook, and then they also help you or assist you with, for an example, if you wanted to do text translations. So one of the use cases that I've seen with the AI functions is doing translations for a customer feedback survey, for an example. So you have a customer feedback survey, and people are sharing their feedback on what's going on what's going on with a product that you're selling, whether it's for shoes and so forth. So in this case, you would then be able to try and translate that text, for example, to Swahili, or you translate that text into Zulu, in which you can then be able to gain better insights. And then you can also detect the sentiment outside of that text. So before I continue talking about AI skills, let's go back and check off on our Dataflow Gen 2 to see if it's still running. It seems like it's still refreshing. Let's see if in our lakehouse that table is in there. But if that's not working, there's our table now. So once you've published your Dataflow Gen 2, it will then be able to send this data into your lakehouse so that you can be able to play around with it. You could open a notebook and you could further clean it. And then after that, maybe you could train a machine learning model and so forth. And then in other instances, you could then be able to use that same data to actually create a Power BI dashboard or report. But that's basically how you could then be able to use Dataflow Gen 2 to ingest your data from majority of the data sources that you could have. So it could be a CSV file, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be an Azure SQL database, and so on. Right, so you can then be able to see your data inside of Microsoft Fabric. Now, let's actually switch over, because I think my capacity is actually up and running. Let's switch over and go back to the Dataflow Gen 2 and show you what I actually wanted to show you. So in a situation where you are, so the first thing that we need to do is go to our workspace, right? So we're gonna close this Dataflow Gen 2. We're going to have to go to our workspace because we created our workspace with a capacity that is not Copilot enabled. So we're going to go to workspace settings, select license info, just edit this and go to Fabric capacity and switch. So I have the AI capacity, which is ist-us, and then I'm going to select license, and I'm going to select change capacity. Hopefully that's going to work. Okay, so let's leave that as is. I'm going to go to a workspace that actually has everything that works properly. So for an example, in this case, I have a semantic model or a lakehouse called AI Fabric. So in this case, I ingested my data using a CSV file, which I just uploaded, which is called customer reviews. And it's getting the customer reviews, it's getting the customer shoe reviews based off of the shoes that they are buying from this fictitious company. And then what they wanted to do is to actually try and visualize this data. So in some scenarios or in some instances, you could try to build out the visualization yourself manually, and that may take you some time. Or in a case where you could be able to use the Copilot accelerated experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric, you could then use Copilot for Power BI to actually achieve something like that. So this is the data set that I have. So I have the shoe type, the size, the color, the material, and then there's the review text. So people are reviewing they're reviewing the shoes or the products. And in this case, I also have other additional columns, which is corrected review text. So this is where I was using the AI functions to actually try and, which is something I'll just show you just now in a notebook. So corrected review text using Azure AI functions to actually correct the grammar of that review text. And then after that, I use the AI functions to analyze the sentiment of this review text and then translate it into Zulu. And then after that, classify the issue into different categories, be it material, size, fit. But this part is not really something that I really wanted to focus on. It's just that I wanted to show you this data. And then if you go back to the workspace, you'll see that I have the semantic model, which is AI Fabric. that semantic model has that table, just only that table called customer shoe reviews. So now if I wanted to build visualizations out of that with that semantic model, how can I do that? So for an example, I could just click on a new item, search for a report, and then I'm going to select report, and then I can choose pick a published semantic model. So this is me working with Power BI, or I could use Excel, I could use CSV, but in this case, because I've already ingested my data from a CSV file into Microsoft Fabric and it went into a semantic model, then I can be able to use that published semantic model. So I'm going to choose that, and then I'm going to choose AI Fabric, and I'm going to toggle that to create a blank report. Whilst that's doing that, I'm going to look for my prompt that I actually used. For this. So I'm going to grab the prompt. And then in this case, so I have this blank report here. I have the blank report here. And then I have my data, which is the table that is coming from my lakehouse or my semantic model. It has all of the columns that are in there. So now what I want to do is to actually build out visualizations based off of that, based off this data. So we have sentiment, we have shoe types, we also have the classifications of or customer issue based off of the issues that the customers are facing. So how can we be able to do that? So I can select the Copilot icon inside of Power BI, the Power BI service, and then I have a few options. In this case, I can create a new report page. I can suggest content for a new report page based off of this data set. So Copilot will suggest a new report page based off of this data set. So normally for me, in my experience, it works well when you have multiple tables and multiple data sources inside of your semantic model, so that it can be able to suggest some of the content that you can be able to use to create a report. But in our case, we're going to use a prompt. This prompt says, create a sentiment analysis report. The report should give or should include a pie chart showing a sentiment distribution between positive, neutral, negative, and then a bar chart that's ranking the cities by negative reviews, then a stacked bar chart displaying the sentiment distribution by product, and a line chart showing sentiment trends over time. So if we send this prompt to Copilot, so hopefully this will work out. If you send this prompt to Copilot, Copilot will then look at, okay, there's a few visualizations that are needed, a pie chart that I need to show the sentiment distribution. I need a bar chart, and I also need a stacked column chart as well to show the distribution by to show the sentiment distribution by product. So in this case, you can see after I've hit send to Copilot based off of my prompt, you can see that I already have a report that's been created for me, which is a sentiment analysis report that I can be able to use to make better data and the sentiment that we provided Copilot. So let's see if we can't edit this. So I'm gonna quickly edit this just quickly and just move things around. I want to add another visualization. And then this visualization that I want to do is a narrative. So now you remember in my presentation as I was talking about the business users. So we are using the Copilot accelerated experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric to build out data solutions. Like for an example, with this prompt that we used, we built out a report based off sentiment analysis. Now, in a case where we want the business users to gain better insights or to have an idea of what's going on the report, how can we then be able to empower them? So if we use the narrative visual for an example here, And we use Copilot with that narrative visual. So I'm just going to extend it a little bit and select Copilot. So in this case, I want to give an overview of what's happening in this report. So I want to give an executive summary, and I want to answer likely questions from leadership and also create a bulleted list of insights. So you can already see as I click the suggested prompts on the narrative visual, you can see that the narrative visual itself is being updated. So it's telling a story of what's happening in the report. It's saying you have total reviews of 500 reviewers, and the sentiment analysis distribution, you have 292 negative reviews, you have 155 mixed, you have 53 positive reviews, and then obviously sentiment distribution by product, so that you can be able to understand what's going on. And you can see now this will then give a better understanding of what's happening in the report to a business user that can be able to read this, and then they can be able to play around with the report themselves to gain better insights using the report that's built out. So we used Copilot to build out this part and also add this narrative visual on our own, and then obviously provide insights to the business users to actually understand what's going on with this data. Then another thing that I wanted to showcase, and which is something that I'm probably not going to be able to cover during the session, is, it's not AI skills, but, with AI skills inside of Microsoft Fabric is that you can be able to allow your users to talk to your data, like I mentioned earlier on. You can create, and configure a data expert on your domain, on your data domain, and you can also share those AI skills with other creators. And like I mentioned, they are sort of like an agent for your data with AI skills and so forth. And so about the AI skills as an agent on your data. So for an example, it lets you analyze and have a conversation with your data. An agent needs to be grounded in your data. So with AI skills today, you can be able to support a lakehouse or a warehouse and even other data sources that are actually coming soon for that. And you'll be able to have context over your prior chat history, naturally enhancing how you can interact with your AI agent that is grounded based off of your data. And also there is an improved chat canvas. Last time I played with AI skills is that you can be able to have robust debugging capabilities, making it simpler than ever to understand and refine your AI responses, and you'll have full visibility into each step taken by the AI agent. And again, with agent to create a new item, select the data source, configure the instructions for your AI with a few short examples, then publish your AI skill, having a published version that can be shared with your consumers on your Microsoft Fabric, inside of a Copilot Studio, inside of Teams and Power BI Copilot. So if you're using a a Copilot for Power BI, you can be able to pull in your AI skills, Azure AI Foundry, and REST that is coming soon. So in which this would be the demo to showcase, but in the interest of time, I won't be able to showcase what's going on with AI skills and also AI functions inside of Microsoft Fabric. But what I wanted to end off during my presentation is that Microsoft Fabric is infused with AI at its core. So all of the experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric, they are infused with AI to their core. So like I mentioned earlier on, your data factory, for an example, you could use the Copilot inside of Data Factory to do your transformations. The transformation that we did together, where we did the calculation together, you could ask Copilot to assist you in generating that gross revenue column so that you can then be able to have a new gross revenue column, and then you can make a few edits here and there. And then you can also clean the data using the assistance from Copilot in the analytics experience, using the data science, data engineering experience inside of a notebook, where you are asking Copilot to suggest, for an example, a machine learning model that would be best fit for your data set, so your data frame in this case, because it would be in a notebook. And then you can be able to use Copilot for databases, Copilot for real-time intelligence to get real-time data insights. And again, what you just saw in my demo, which is the Copilot for Power BI, where you can be able to curate and create new reports and also provide a narrative visual using the assistance of Copilot to actually give better insights or give an overview of what's happening in that report using Copilot as well. And again, do not forget that all of this has one lake supporting it, all of these experiences. So you have your one lake as your OneDrive for your data, and you have Microsoft Purview for security and governance. So as you're building out your solutions for this hack together, you just have to make sure on where are you in your journey, in your data journey. You want to do your data ingestion. Okay, you ingest your data through the data factory experience using Dataflow Gen 2, or you already ingested your data, you want to train a machine learning model. You could then use notebooks, and with the assistance of Copilot, if you have the F64 capacity, to actually suggest a proper machine learning model based off of your data that you have. Or you are using real-time intelligence, where you're streaming real-time data inside of Microsoft Fabric, and you are triggering actions out of that data using Activator for real-time intelligence, or you're building dashboards or reports based off of your data. So other than that, just wanted to say thank you so much for listening in, and hopefully we'll see some awesome projects that are coming out of the hack together. Make sure that you, again, understand where you are in your data journey as you are building out your solution. Ingest your data using Data Factory, all the way through building out visualizations and reports to gain better insights based off of your data. Other than that, thank you so much, and I will hand it back to Moria or Bethany.
Nico. There is some questions on the chat, however, so I will take like 2-3 minutes for you to answer some of the questions. So there's one: how does Fabric improve on Power BI?
So that's a great question. So in this case, Power BI is actually part of the experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric. So think of Microsoft Fabric as a family of products or a family of tools and services that will guide you throughout your data journey. So in this case, with Fabric, with all of the products inside of it, you can do a lot more. So you could do your transformations, you could train machine learning models inside of Microsoft Fabric without having to spin up an Azure resource using your Azure subscription. You could also stream real-time data, and then you could visualize that real-time data using Power BI. So think of Power BI as being part of the experiences inside of Microsoft Fabric, and not Fabric being a product that is improving on Power BI.
What Fabric does is basically brings all these tools together in one platform and ensuring like I'm able to add in connectors and AI as well, right?
Yeah, it's a unified data platform where you can do everything in your data journey in one place.
There's a question: can we connect an AI agent with external prompts for visuals?
I'm not sure what the question is. So you want to connect an AI agent with external prompts for visuals. So in this case, if you say an AI agent, and I assume you're talking about AI skills, in this case, you'd have to interact with the AI skills through an interface, whether it's inside of Fabric or you are interacting with it on Microsoft Teams, for an example, and you could ask that, you could ask the AI skill to actually to give you better insights off of your data. From what I've seen in a recent demo, it seems like you can be able to get visuals from the AI agent itself, but you'll have to double check this as well. I'll also look at it to play around with their skills to see if it actually brings back visuals. But when you say external prompts, I'm still unsure on what you mean about external prompts.
Also, was not sure about that, so that's why I had to ask. And then there's a question around if you're collaborating with another developer, but they're not in your organization, how do you navigate that?
That is a good question, and I think that could be tricky as well. If you're collaborating with another developer in your data journey, I think one of you would have to have the central place where you're, like, for an example, you're ingesting your data. So maybe that developer is mainly focused on doing the data collection side of your data journey, and then on your end, you're just ingesting the data inside of the organization. Because for now, for what I know, is that Microsoft Fabric is only allowing you to collaborate with people inside of your organization. So if you want to have an access to a workspace, you need to have access to that organization's tenant. So if you're in different organizations, then maybe that could be a challenge for you guys to actually work on something, unless one of you has something that's up and running. And this is just only for development purposes and not production. You're on mute, Beth. Okay, now I can hear you.
There's another question on disaster recovery. So the question is, do we have disaster recovery capabilities to these tables in Microsoft Fabric?
The short answer that I could give, in my opinion, and I think if you attend some of the other sessions, I think sessions that are going to come from this Hack Together, you might get like a better answer. But from my understanding is yes, but then you'll have like a broader answer in another session. Probably Josh might cover this.
So much. So for the rest of the questions, there's a question around what is there a basic version of Fabric for personal projects? Unfortunately, for now, Fabric is only organizational based. But the question is, can it be run in macOS? I normally use Fabric on browser, so I don't know. You can use a browser anyway, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for that, just understand that Fabric is a software as a service. So you can be able to access it in a browser, like Bethany had mentioned. If you want to use Fabric, you have to access it on a browser where you access all of the other resources of your organization or your tenant.
Thank you so much, Deco, for the session. It was very insightful and it covered a whole depth onto Microsoft Fabric. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a part of a series, the Kenya Data Plus AI Hackathon. And we have a session on the 27th of March around building high-scale RAG applications with Event House in Microsoft Fabric. So if you're interested in building applications that are AI-driven, but also are able to add in your own data, be sure to join us for that session. It will be streamed live on the reactors as well as Power BI. Same time, but now on Tuesday next week. And then for other questions that have not been answered, you can keep in touch with us on the Discord channel. Everything around the Discord channel and the hackathon is in the link that was shared at the beginning of the session, the AKRMF-data-AI-hack-Kenya. And then I have seen a last question. May I know if anyone can participate in the hackathon? Unfortunately, yes, everyone can, but it's based in Kenya only, so only Kenyan participants will be eligible to win a prize. But you can still participate for the fun of it. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Diko, for this awesome session, and see you next Tuesday. Bye.
Bye.